Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of Bushes on the Trail. I'm Al, and Christy and I are finally home after a trip to McAfee Knob in Virginia. That's right, we walked the Appalachian Trail all the way up to McAfee Knob on a day hike, and we sat on the edge of the cliff about 3,100 feet above sea level. Yes, it's very high. You'll see mountains below us off in the distance, and it was really cool. A little windy, a little scary at times, but pretty cool experience. We will walk the entire Appalachian Trail up to the knob and back and even beyond just to show you what the trail's like in that area. And the views are spectacular. Again, this is the most photographed area of the entire Appalachian Trail, and you'll see why. Stick around. And here Christy and I go, starting our journey up the Appalachian Trail to McAfee Knob. Now, McAfee Knob is one of the most popular places on the Appalachian Trail to visit. It has easy access from the highway. It is in Virginia, and there's a small highway that crosses right in front of the trailhead with a parking lot. It's a fairly decent sized parking lot, but since it's so popular, it's very hard to find parking there. Sometimes you have to go around the corner and down another side road, which Christy and I had to do to park in order to start our journey up to McAfee Knob. Unlike other AT portions of the trail, you'll notice this one is a lot wider. What we saw in Georgia and we've seen in the Smokies when we've been on the AT before, the trail's a little narrower, but it is still rugged in certain parts, so you do get that aspect of the AT. Now, although this area is wider, still doesn't mean it's a lot easier. There are some portions that are very tough, like this area that is extremely rocky. Also along the way, you'll see several boulders that are on the side of the trail, and some we will actually walk through later on in the trail after we pass McAfee Knob and continue on the Appalachian Trail. At this point along the journey, Christy and I come to a place where we have to make a decision. We can either follow this fire road, which will bypass a portion of the Appalachian Trail. I think this is actually called the McAfee Knob Trail. Or we can follow the AT north and challenge ourselves a little more and take the harder route to McAfee Knob. Of course, we decided to take the harder route, but remember, the harder the climbs, the better the views. And here are one of those views as I stand up on one of the rock ledges and check out the mountains in Virginia. And then as you pass through a few areas of the green tunnel, which are narrow, you get back onto the rockier terrain, and you see some of these huge slabs of stone and rock on the mountain that just go on as far as you can see up the side, which are pretty cool. Also, as you continue on, you get to see those magnificent views through the trees from time to time. Christy and I traversed down these trail stairs and come to a fork where we can head off to a shelter where there's a privy if you really need it. We didn't need it, so we continued on up the trail. And we continue along the trail over roots and steps, rock steps. There are tree logs that are used as steps. There are steps all over this trail. And it is handy and a detriment sometimes. It can be a little tricky to traverse. But as you're going on the Appalachian Trail, you always see that iconic white blaze up here on the left. And as long as you follow it, you'll make your way to your destination. Although this portion of the trail wasn't strenuous, it was a little tough to get your footing sometimes. You had to watch where you stepped. There were a lot of roots, and as you can see, a lot of slab-style rocks, and some were slick, so you had to be careful and make sure you had your trekking poles in the right place or your footing was good before you take that next step, or you might find yourself looking up at the sky. If you've seen our earlier videos where Christy and I went up to the southern terminus of the Appalachian Trail on Springer Mountain, and I went over the actual quote from Harold Allen, one of the contributors of the AT, and he said, "The Appalachian Trail is remote for detachment, narrow for chosen company, winding for leisure, and lonely for contemplation." Let me tell you something. There's so many people on here, there is no loneliness or remoteness of detachment from people. This area of the trail is well traveled by a lot of people, so don't be surprised if you go there and you see a ton of people on this. Again, it's one of the easier portions of the trail to access with one of the most spectacular views. Christy and I are now walking through an area of lush green forest with some flowers, and they were really pretty. But then we came upon a shelter area and we decided to take a break and see if we could find a fresh water source. We didn't need it, but we wanted to try to replenish what we could. Unfortunately, the water source was dried up, and this became a running theme from the parking lot all the way up to McAfee Knob. And now we're crossing back over the fire road and heading on up the Appalachian Trail up these steps. For a lot of people who decide to come up and night hike this early in the morning so they can see the sunrise, several people will take the actual fire road because it's a little easier, a path, a little wider, not as rocky and not as many steps, so they can get up to this area and then continue on to McAfee Knob. They'll do it at night with their headlamps. Sure, it's pretty tricky to maneuver sometimes, but the views for a sunrise would be amazing. Here we are, the actual forest opens up and we start to see blue sky above us. Yes, no trees, and we are looking at power lines. Yes, this is one of those areas where you see power lines going up the mountain. Appalachian Trail is long, it's 2,200 miles long from Georgia to Maine, so it's bound to pass under a few power lines along the way. This is one of those sections. So if you've ever wondered what it looks like underneath one of those power lines, now you've got an idea. Who would have guessed it? More steps. But at least we are getting a lot closer to our destination. Not much farther now, and we will reach the portion of the mountain where we're going to have some magnificent views off of McAfee Knob. Wrapping up the last section of rocky terrain, we come finally to a blue blaze that will lead us down a path to our destination. Finally, we're here, one of the most photographed areas of the entire Appalachian Trail, McAfee Knob in Virginia. McAfee Knob is one of the three jewels in the Virginia Triple Crown, and as you look off in the distance to the mountaintop right there, that is another jewel in the Virginia Triple Crown of hiking, and it is Tinker's Cliffs. And then the other one is the infamous Dragon's Tooth. Christy and I watch a bird of prey fly by as we eat our lunch, and we sit and look at the ridge line where we would eventually have to hike if we wanted to go to Tinker's Cliffs. And it's something that she and I are contemplating doing in the future. Here I am sitting on the edge of McAfee Knob, and it's 3,100 feet above sea level, so what's the best way to get off that cliff? Gingerly roll over and then try to force your way up onto the plateau. And here's Christy enjoying her moment sitting on the edge of McAfee Knob. After spending about an hour on McAfee Knob, eating our lunch, checking out the magnificent views, and taking like a bazillion pictures, Christy and I decided to continue our trek along the Appalachian Trail north towards Tinker's Cliffs. Now, we didn't make the entire journey to Tinker's Cliffs, which would have been another 5 to 6 miles, but we continued along the trail for another mile or so to a nearby shelter. Along the way, we passed through these fields of boulders, and the path was really narrow. It was more rugged than what we faced before on our way up to McAfee Knob. It passed through some really narrow green portions of the forest that made switchbacks down the side of the mountain. It was a fantastic hike, and it was more like what Harold Allen meant in his quote when he said, "The AT is remote for detachment, narrow for chosen company, winding for leisure, lonely for contemplation. It beckons not merely north and south, but upward to the body, mind, and soul of man." This portion of the trail epitomized that quote. We hardly saw anybody on the trail. It was really quiet, really peaceful, and what Christy and I believe the AT is all about. Now Christy and I are leaving the shelter and heading back up to McAfee Knob about a mile away south on the AT. Once we connect to the AT, it'll be very green, and you will see down the right it is very steep down the hill and very steep going up. All I can say in this portion of the trail is thank God for switchbacks. About a half a mile past the actual shelter, as you're heading south towards McAfee Knob, back up the mountain, there are these rock formations and a trail that weaves in and out of these formations, past some little caves, and then back onto the trail. So Christy and I took a detour and followed it, and it was a really cool portion of the hike. Christy and I lead the little trail through the rock formations, get back on the AT, and head south back towards McAfee Knob. And look, more steps. Who would have guessed? As we reapproach the northern side of McAfee Knob, I decided, hey, let's get a little closer view up over the edge. So this is what it looks like, sort of hanging over the edge. Now here we start to make our way along the narrow cliff sides from the north edges of McAfee Knob down towards the southern edges so we can continue on the AT and head home. Unfortunately, we bid adieu to the valleys below and the view from McAfee Knob before we can head back down the roughly 4 miles to the parking lot along the Appalachian Trail. A couple of things to keep in mind if you decide to tackle this trail. Number one, follow the white blazes. Make sure you stay on those. It's really easy to follow, especially from the parking lot all the way up to McAfee Knob. It's usually pretty wide except for a few narrow areas, like when you're passing under the power lines, and a couple areas where the rocks are actually pretty steep up along the hillside. There's a lot of traffic through here, so you might have to step aside for other hikers as they come up. But make sure, first and foremost, that you bring plenty of water and maybe a snack, because we saw a lot of people going up who didn't have water and were complaining about it only a mile into the hike, and they still had another 3+ miles or so to go up to get to McAfee Knob. According to my Gut Hook app, which is used by through hikers to check water sources and shelters along the way when they do a through hike from Georgia to Maine, the water sources in this area were reported to be low, and we checked that before we went, so we made sure we had plenty of water to make our way up to McAfee Knob and back. As far as the difficulty rating for a portion of the trail from the parking lot up to McAfee Knob, it's really not that difficult. Moderate at best. Yeah, there's going to be portions where you're going to be breathing heavy. You might have to stop and catch your breath. There's some rocky portions where you have to watch your footing, but overall, it's not a bad trail to hike. And you don't have to be some uber hiker in order to tackle this one. We've been on much tougher trails in the Smokies, and even the approach trail to Springer Mountain was tougher than this portion of the AT. This is one of the narrower portions of the trail, and we're glad we didn't run into any other hikers because there's nowhere to step aside. You either have to step off down on the side of the mountain or try to climb up the side to the right through all the weeds and stuff. You didn't know what was in there, so thank goodness nobody came through this section of the trail. And what you're seeing now is the very rocky portion that we started off on the trail going down. And honestly, in my opinion, going up was a lot easier than coming down. A lot less impact on the knees, and it's a lot easier to get your footing going up than trying to steady yourself going down these slick rocks. Here we are on the home stretch of the hike, almost down to the highway and the parking lot for McAfee Knob. And then once we get there into our car, we are heading into Roanoke and looking for that hiker favorite, a dive bar with a great burger and some beer. Once again, the Appalachian Trail does not disappoint. It gives you a little bit of a challenge, and the view from McAfee Knob is spectacular. It's really not a bad hike, especially if you're not a well-seasoned hiker. You can do this. Just put one foot in front of the other, take your time. You'll see some spectacular views along the way, and up at the top, it is an awesome experience. And I know it looks scary to set on the ledge, but take your time, scoot out, just don't lean too far forward. You should be fine, I hope. And make sure the wind is blowing in. That always helps. If you decide to take a trek on this portion of the Appalachian Trail, please do yourself a favor. Take plenty of water with you. It's not that hard to carry, and you're going to be grateful that you had it. We saw several hikers going up who were complaining about not having any water. And they were only a mile into the trip. They still had another 3 miles up to the knob and then another 4 back. So please make sure you have water. And if you like to filter your water through streams, make sure you check an app like Gut Hook or some other local app to make sure that the water sources are flowing, because when we were there, they were almost dried up. This is definitely another trip that Christy and I plan on doing again, hopefully sometime in the fall. If not the fall of 2020, possibly the fall of 2021. We'd also like to tie in the Virginia Triple Crown, which is Dragon's Tooth, McAfee Knob, and Tinker's Cliff, and staying over at the shelters a couple of those nights. So do yourself a favor. If you get a chance, check out this portion of the Appalachian Trail. You're going to love it. And after a great hike, where do you go? Well, you go to downtown Roanoke to Jack Brown's Beer and Burger Joint. If you do any portion of the Virginia Triple Crown, check this place out. I suggest trying out the Cobra Kai as a burger. It's fantastic. They got great burgers, ice cold beer, and fantastic service. All right, everybody, thanks for watching. And please, if you don't mind, give us a thumbs up. Hit the like button. It'll really help people find us on YouTube. Also, please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of our other adventures right here on Bushes on the Trail.